last question of the adverse childhood experience test. Guys, you can buy us a coffee there. You have the QR code on the left-hand corner. If you want to support us, call more guests, then maybe might require, an investment from our part. But also on the left-hand corner there, as we change to the slide with a question, there's a QR code that you can scan to go and take the ACE test, the Adverse Childhood Experience Test. And now, at the end of the form, there is a place where you can put your score and email me the score with a little commentary of why you think, or with the story behind the yes answers that you may give to the Adverse Childhood Experience Test. And so in that way, we might bring those stories back to the All About Trauma lives and comment on them, and for you to start to engage with this material in a more sort of objective way. We are covering the second last question, and it's all about having a member of the family suffering from mental illness, or having gone through a suicidal attempt, or even suicidal ideation, which is very connected to depression and other mental illnesses such as bipolar disorder, as well as schizophrenia, and so on. So one thing that I came across this week was the work by Willoughby Britton, who is a contemplative science neuroscientist. So she studies from a neuroscientific, a neurological point of view. So she puts people in a scanner, or just studies the neurology, the brain mechanisms that influence contemplation. And in particular, focus is meditation. So she's done a lot of work around understanding meditation. And it turns out that meditation, other than being a subject that we discussed quite in depth in the live with Leonard this week, is also something that does not have a monotonic expression. What do I mean by monotonic? I mean, monotonic means mono, so one, and tonic is the tone. So it does not have a flat line expression. Meditation, in other words, is not just good, or not just bad. It actually has a curve which we call inverted U shape. So you can think of a horseshoe kind of shape. And so when you are on this side of the horseshoe, you're going up, you have a deficiency of meditation, so you don't do enough meditation. And as you're moving out of that deficiency, you benefit a lot from meditation. But then you can peak on how much meditation you're doing, and then you will fall onto the negative sides of meditation. So the researcher Willoughby Britton has documented now, and she's not the only one actually, she's part of a network of researchers that have documented this, but she's now documented the fact that meditation can take you to altered states that will end up in dysregulation. The kind of dysregulation that we see with schizophrenic clients, depression, bipolar indeed, and psychedelic drugs consumers. So people that have trips or use psychedelics on a regular basis or not. What this brings us to is this sense that meditation too can be a dysregulating mechanism. And what is the common denominator between doing too much meditation, being depressed, being mentally ill, wanting to commit suicide, is indeed this notion of dysregulation. So what Willoughby Britton says is that in all of these cases, in all of the sort of mental illness kind of scenarios, schizophrenia, depression, eating disorders, anxiety disorders, attention deficit disorders, of course, And then altered states of meditation is that we note a kind of an hypo prefrontal activation. What does that mean? We had spoken at the beginning of our All About Trauma. Hyporeactivity, hypo states, has a reaction to being too anxious, right? So after a traumatic event, our amygdala, our emotional systems are hyperactivated, but then our brain decides, I cannot endure this hyperactivation, so I'm going to shut down a lot of the emotional systems, and then we enter into the hypoactivation states, which are still correlated to the trauma event, but they do not express themselves in ongoing hyper-alertness. They become hypo-alertness. So you become numb in common daily terms. You become emotionally numb. So schizophrenia, depression, eating disorders, anxiety disorders, attention deficit disorders all have this hypo attention deficit, basically. This hypo activation of the prefrontal cortex. It means the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for how we pay attention to things, is down, is not operating at an optimal level. Okay. So when we think of dysregulation and mental illness, we now need to include the notion that the brain is not able to pay attention to the world in the way that a normal person can. And so if this includes children, if this includes carrying out some tasks, some important tasks like, I don't know, cooking, house chores, but also administration, for example. If you're working in administration where you have to pay attention to a lot of, data, tiny details of where this data goes and where that data goes, then that becomes very difficult for a person that is suffering these hypo states of prefrontal cortex activation, right? It's difficult to pay attention and to sustain attention on such details. I guess my point here in trying to simplify the understanding of what mental illness is in the context of a family is to suggest that you can think of anyone suffering from mental illness as someone who is highly dysregulated, and they're highly dysregulated because they have difficulties paying attention to the world in a way that would make them emotionally regulated. So another simple example, one of the characteristic phenomena in dysregulation is the difficulty sleeping. So insomnia, or just waking up because of nightmares, or having difficulties going to sleep. When we have any of these, we wake up in the morning with an hypo prefrontal cortex activation. That is, we feel foggy. We feel our cognitive planning functions are not as sharp as they should be, right? We all have experienced a sleepless night, and when we wake up in the morning, we feel foggy, right? So imagine people suffering mental illness going through that state basically on a daily basis. Right? So they wake up, they feel foggy. When you feel foggy, your capacity to control your emotions is reduced. So if you have hyper alertness because of trauma, your explosivity or your sort of erratic responses, kind of explosive, unforeseen, unpredictable emotional responses become more likely. So when that becomes the case, people who are on the outside, who cannot predict these shifts in emotions, will be surprised, to say the very least. But if it happens over and over and these situations are not well contained and controlled, then the people around the mentally ill person will start to become anxious and fearful about this happening again, right? because it's uncomfortable. When there is a very strong shift in emotions, we just don't know what to do in that moment. If somebody gets suddenly angry, or somebody gets suddenly very, very sad, they can't get out of bed, maybe they are unwilling to eat or to respond to our questions even, um, you just don't know what to do. And so you start to fear these events, and in fearing these events, you start to adapt your life and your habits in such a way as to cope with those events, right? So as we attempt to cope with those events and take control of them or do other things, our own lives becomes affected and dysregulated, because we start to navigate our life around the difficulties of this person to pay attention in a constant way to certain things and to remain emotionally regulated. So dysregulation in one person is somewhat contagious onto people that are close by, including colleagues, including, of course, family members. Right? This is the thread that links the dysregulation of one family member to a systemic dysregulation of the other family members. Is this sort of unpredictability towards, yes, states like deep sadness or deep rage or anger or deep fear.
So that's a very good explanation about dysregulation. And what comes to mind, Nicholas, if I might bring forward, is that I remembering the question we got to touch on, whereby this could be a manifestation of hypo state, whereby would you say the dysregulation whereby there's in a not a hyperactive but a hypoactive, that's what leads to neglect, whereby the person, your parent wakes up, he's foggy, and that's where the question of the child is
Yeah.
left dirty, the nappies are not cleaned, because that attention to detail, waking up foggy, you're like, oh, the child is dirty, is clean, is crying. Well, you don't care about
Yes,
that kind of details. And the
absolutely.
child,
Hypostates are very, sorry interrupting you there, but you're just right on point. Hypostates are very strong. It's not because they're so subdued and almost invisible until they touch us personally that they are not as affecting as, let's say, a rage expression, right? When you wake up as a mother or as a father, often as a mother, but as a primary caregiver, and your child is crying and you're completely numb emotionally, you don't hear that cry in the same way that a normal person would.
Mhm.
You just don't, the cry does not hit your senses in the same way. So you will react much more slowly, much later. I remember the case of a client whose mother, and I think I described a little bit this client last time or another time, but the issue here was that the mother had gone through the loss of two brothers in a relatively short amount of time. And then she had had a pregnancy and the baby was born in between the death of these two brothers. And right there, she became very sick and ill. And part of the sickness and illness included the feeling a lot of pain when somebody touched her anywhere around the body. And I remember my client describing how she was sometimes in the room where her mother was, and her mother was sitting on the couch, and the little baby was in a cradle not far from her, maybe 1 or 2 meters from her, and the baby would cry, and the mother would not be able to stand up and go and attend this little baby that was nearby because of how much pain she was going through. And my client was watching all of this. And then the mother would send her upstairs because she didn't want her to witness what was going on. Right? So, but she had seen it. And so then the mother would kind of get angry with her or dismiss her and say, go upstairs and do your thing. Or even if she did it gently, which I don't think was the case, but even if she did it gently, she would say, darling, please go upstairs and do your thing. How can you go upstairs relaxed when you know, when you have heard as a child, your baby brother crying and being in distress, and seeing, witnessing a mother who is in such pain that she cannot attend to the little boy? And that experience done over and over a few years is, in my opinion, going to change the way I see the world, the way I see myself, the kind of confidence I will have in myself, the kind of sense of safety I will produce about the world. And what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very clear indication and aligns with what I was saying, that for that client to witness that, she will actually just get to what it means to really take care of someone that you feel that you should. And at that point, would you say that after you do it so many times, the child who is witnessing all of this will tune out? Right now, you can't even recognize whether the child is crying or not crying because it seems nothing is changing. There's no rush, no one is moving. And the fact that the mother has, maybe the mother even wants to cry too because of her pain,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
she's put herself in the hypo state, and she wants the baby to do the same, because the fact that
Yes.
yeah, the lady is going through pain, she wants to cry too, but she knows it'll be futile, so she just has numbed herself and tries to numb her environment, including, her youngest child.
Yeah, because one way of sending the my client was about 5 or 6 when she was witnessing this. The way of sending this 5-6 years old child into an hypo sort of reaction can also be by saying, hey, just go upstairs and do your thing, as if all of this was not going on, right? So just sort of neglect in a way, or put away, or put under a rug, or delete, deny, all of these sort of compressing sort of actions that we can do mentally and towards our emotions, right? That's the message that you get. And do not get excited, do not get alerted, do not get interested, do not try to do something, but just move away, cut off, go upstairs. Sometimes we talked about this with Leonard, how we often divorce ourselves from our bodies, right? And how mindfulness is so helpful in allowing us to recuperate this relationship to ourselves. And here, literally, physically, we are sending the child upstairs while the body is crying. That is a metaphorical, but also very practical way of teaching a child to separate themselves from the body. Right? You hear what you identify with, your family body crying, just go upstairs and shut the door and don't think about it.
And block it out completely, because like you said, Leonard made sure to say that being mindful is an innate nature we have. So at this 5-6 year old, you're telling your child to disconnect from that innate nature. Yeah. And I'm just picturing, after some time, the child will be coming back from school or wherever and pass that room, knowing that in that room, my mother is in pain, my little brother is crying, whatever, I'm going straight to my room. Like, I don't even acknowledge there's anything happening.
Yeah, almost word for word, I've heard my client describe similar situations. Yes.
And it so can only.
I'm thinking before we move on a little bit, let's extend a little bit of compassion towards the mother here, because
Yeah.
I don't want to our viewers to think in any way that I'm, you know, pointing my finger to the mother saying that she has done something wrong. No, this is an individual who has suffered grave distress because of the loss of two brothers at a young age. So guilt for and shame for staying alive. It's called the survivor complex sometimes.
Mm.
Deep sadness that she's not able to process for whatever reason, right?
Mm.
So most probably a disconnect between mind and body, then a personal illness that is expressing itself very strongly. So this individual is going through very dysregulating emotions and physical sensations. So she would be the primary target of our compassion if we had access to this person, right? But it goes to
Absolutely.
show, this example, to show how the principal dysregulation of a parent can be passed on the other family members, particularly children who are so dependent on the regulatory processes of the parent.
And and I think even how we got to discuss with Leonard, whereby there's a window in which you can get to maybe intercept and begin the healing. She didn't have that from one brother to
No.
the next brother to her
Yeah.
own body. So by the time she could have, absorbed, okay, my first brother has gone away. How can I process this? The second one
Right.
goes, she's ill. Um, she's trying to be a mother herself,
A new
and she
child,
feels,
baby.
yeah, to a child, and even the older one, maybe she also feels some shame that I haven't
Yeah.
been as present because I've been trying to deal with my own mourning of losing a sibling. So it really almost transcends to your younger child, whereby there will be a disconnect between a younger child and now the sibling, both of your children, because it feels like you're also battling that, disconnect and the disconnection, whereby your siblings have died. And if your older, actually the client that you're saying doesn't feel the same connection with a younger brother, would that mean that whatever happens to him, maybe it goes quiet and the brother is gone, she will have already disconnected, because whether you're crying or quiet,
It's
your
a beautiful
existence is almost.
it's a beautiful insight you're having there, that it could be that my client was at some unconscious level taught to disconnect from her own brother
Yeah.
by the mother in a way to protect this child from the pain of losing a brother.
Yeah.
So yeah, indeed. And in terms of the window of tolerance, I think it's nice to mention it. I would say the window of tolerance gets smaller and smaller and smaller when you are hit by such tragedies. Right? First brother dies, you don't expect it. What is the world about? How does the world function? I need to rethink it through, right? So my window of tolerance gets a little shorter because some of this space is taken up by the processing of the grief of the first brother. Then the pregnancy comes. Of course, it's a dysregulating mechanism to have a pregnancy. Very few women go through a pregnancy without any issues. Then the little baby is born. The little baby that comes out of the womb of the mother is very dysregulated. Because imagine you come out into the world from being in this universe, that is so different. So second, third dysregulating factor, and then another brother dies. Fourth dysregulating. So slowly, the window of tolerance of this woman is becoming smaller and smaller. And perhaps the amount of pain that she was feeling on the body is really the body saying, I can't take this anymore. I need to cry. 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 Right. And so these 24 hours a day, the body of this woman is crying out the pain in a way, right? Like the physical pain is essentially the psychological pain that cannot be spoken about.
So it's quite, yeah, it's quite a compassionate where we have to explain compassion to her, understanding her experience. And we have just picked off the story from the brother. We don't know what could have happened before that. Some incidents and experiences that could have just built up and also almost culminated from the brother experience losing her siblings. So I think we're going quite into time, and I just wanted to share one question on the same, whereby for this the second last question about dysregulation. When we've got to mention that when the person is dysregulated, they don't even fully acknowledge and understand themselves. The self-awareness is almost, almost stifled. So the question, how it's phrased, that I had a household member depressed or mentally ill, would you say that the child almost sees this person as a stranger? Because not only does the individual, because of their mental state, doesn't really have awareness of themselves, they can't even share themselves and present themselves so that they're familiar to their own children. For example, even picking up on this client, the little girl, could that be even a disconnection whereby the little girl can't even hold her own mother and said, let me hold you, you're in pain, you want to take care of the child, let me just, if I can't hold the child, can I just hold you to connect with you? I can't connect with you, I can't connect with the child. So anyone in that room is disconnected from me.
Yes, when you present the question, what is happening in my body is that I'm slowly coming into this space of disconnection and the hopelessness that comes with this situation. I think the child, we know that children are very much in an egocentric sort of state, right? Whereby they feel the universe is a cause of their own doings, that the world is organized around them. So I think we need to turn that question around in the sense that this child is probably beginning to construct the idea of a world that is the way that it is because he is not sufficient, she is not sufficient, she is not enough. Or because, for example, a picture of a world where her emotions do not have space to be. So we need to kind of turn that around and see it from the point of view of this egocentric, natural egocentric place that the child is in. And the child constructs rules and laws about this world to justify how it is based on what it is not. So my emotions do not have a place in this world, and that is good, because if they don't have a place in this world, then the world outside of me is more stable, and that's fine. I can give up my emotions. At that age, you can make that kind of decision, and it's the only decision that you can make. And the effects of that decision only become apparent later when you try to build your own intimacy connections with the world, when you try to connect with others, in an intimate level, or when you find yourself in situations where your emotions are absolutely primary to experiencing harmony and lack of conflict and just survival capacity. That's one thing that comes to mind. It's, whenever I'm confronted with questions like this, there is deep silence in me, because I can understand the hurt. Maybe you can also, right? As you think more deeply about this story, you can feel the hurt, but how do you express this hurt? What do you say? It's not an obvious step between feeling it physically and verbalizing it. And it's something that most of my clients will go through. The difficulty to verbalize hurt is not trivial.
And I think also we get to a point where we have to extend so much compassion, because it seems like everyone in this situation would want to also express it. In fact, even the child, maybe your client yourself, when she goes to a room, she wants to cry. But can she cry, or should she cry?
No, of course.
Will it be accepted in this? Maybe. So she's getting to understand that it's okay. It's this environment doesn't accept me to express what I think of the situation. So, and that's I think that she's getting to maybe accommodate and encourage in herself that being in a hypo state is good. So when she's in a situation and she's trying to bond, and she has to dig deep and give of herself, she won't have that capacity to do so.
It's threatening. Yes, it's dangerous to express your sadness. To cry becomes a dangerous action. Or if it's not dangerous, it is a source of, it's associated with hurting others. So as an adult, say I engage in an intimate partner relationship and something has happened and I want to cry, and that cry is going to be such a healthy expression of sadness or anger in the relationship, and for the two partners to come closer together, to share a better understanding of reality, to co-regulate together. But now suddenly my cry is that which causes pain to my partner. And of course, I don't want to cause pain to my partner. Right? And of course, there is going to be some pain involved in your partner acknowledging that you are going through pain, because you go from an isolated sort of self-regulating mechanism to a co-regulating mechanism, right? So some of the pain that you're going through is going to be felt empathically by your other partner. Some of it is going to be transferred to your other partner. So that's true. But that event is going to be seen and felt as something that is really hurtful to the partner. And so therefore something that I should avoid. Because as if I were the cause of my partner's potential illness. Because as a child, maybe I formulated a worldview that my emotions and my crying is the cause of my mother's suffering, you know, and incapacity to hug me or be touched. So you're totally right, René. You're totally right. I'm just backing up what your intuitions are there. Yeah.
And there's so much more we can actually delve into it, but the fact that we are quite out of time,
Yes.
getting almost to the last question soon enough. Thank you for this kind of discussion we were able to have. And I hope everyone was able to get some insight from it on how dysregulation can manifest himself, both in hyper states and hypo states. We're still working on getting new guests that we are really excited to be sharing with these conversations with. So I'm really suggest guys to make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to look out for any of the new lives that will be coming from. So thank you again, Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you to you
for this live, in case you want to have any conclusive word.
Yeah, no, I'm just, you know, sometimes I'm surprised as to how much time it takes to cover one question. But I don't think anybody has done this out there. And so perhaps that's what needs to be done. Certainly our approach has been more towards feeling the questions, you know, bringing stories that can move us and get us closer to an understanding of the question, not just mentally, but physically and emotionally. And in that way, I'm proud of the work that we're doing and happy that this may help, or confident rather, that this may help certain viewers. So thank you to you, René, for your beautiful questions, insights, responses, thoughts, and thank you for everybody for watching this, and we'll see you next week.